Guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about specifically what it means to have your Mars in Gemini and your Mars in the third house. So my name is Brandon. I do astrology videos here on YouTube. If you're interested in any of these videos, I have a whole playlist down below where I went through all of the Aries and first house and Taurus and second house videos there. And this is my Gemini and third house series. So I'm going to be doing Mars today with Mars in Gemini and Mars in the third house and what that kind of means. If you don't know what your chart placement is, what your Mars placement is, feel free to look down below. There's going to be a link down there if you can generate your chart so you can kind of see what your Mars placement is and if it's in the third house or if it's in Gemini. And so those are things that this video is for you. Otherwise, there's many other things within astrology that this can kind of come to. And I'm going to be going through this entire series through each sign and house in that order. And so there's going to be quite a lot of information here with that playlist. So feel free to look down below for that as well. So before I get started, I'm going to do a little bit of a just introduction of what Mars specifically means within astrology and within astrology chart. And then after that, I'm going to talk to specifically about the Mars in Gemini portion and then the Mars in the third house portion. So if you look down in the description box below, you're going to see a timestamp that will tell you where I talk about what with the Mars Gemini portion as well as the Mars third house portion. So yeah, I am so excited to do this series. It's super fun. Gemini energy is quite rambunctious and active. And so there's been a lot of activity, mental activity during this series for me, which has been super fun and super enjoyable. And so with that being said, I'm going to go on to the next part. We're going to talk specifically about Mars and astrology and kind of what that energy within a chart signifies and how it can kind of play its role and what role it does tend to play. Okay, so when it comes to Mars in astrology, Mars is this very fiery, very active, very energetic planet. It has a lot to do with our willpower, what we accomplish, our goals, what we go after, things of that nature. The symbol looks like that. I just got this Mars tattoo, actually, funny enough. So it looks like that in your chart. It has a lot to do with specifically how you utilize your own willpower, your own energy, and depending upon what sign and aspects and house and things that the Mars is in will tell you how Mars is kind of working things for you, against you, what hurdles you may have, how you're utilizing your energy, what you like to utilize your energy for, what motivates you, what inspires you. There's a lot of inspiration when it comes to Mars. Also what angers you, right? Because Mars is a very fiery, angry, impulsive planet. So there can be this anger to it as well. This kind of like reactivity, what you're willing to fight for is very Martian. So knowing those specific placements when it relates to Mars is really important, and seeing what Mars aspects you have, what Mars is doing within your chart to kind of get a better idea of what you fight for, what you're willing to fight for, what drives you, what gets you up in the morning, how much energy you have, how you use your energy, and how you accomplish your goals. And so obviously this video is for the Mars Gemini and Mars third house portions. And so if you have your Mars in Gemini, this video is for you, as well as if you have your Mars in the third house. And so we'll get started right off the bat, and we'll go into the Mars in Gemini portion right now. So when it comes to the Mars in Gemini, this placement is quite fun for me. I've experienced quite a few Mars Gemini within my own life, and there's been quite a lot of clients and quite a lot of people I know that actually have Mars in Gemini. Not as much as the Mars in Cancer people, which I will so excited to do in the next series, but Mars in Gemini has this very interesting way of getting things done. So those that don't know, Mars is a planet that specifically works with how you get things done, and it does well in signs that it rules. So it traditionally rules Aries and Scorpio, and then it's exalted, meaning that it does quite well, or it will kind of bring itself up more naturally with the sign of Capricorn when Mars is in Capricorn. And then in its inverse, there's that difficulty with Mars being in the sign of Cancer, where it kind of can struggle a little bit more with that come up, but it definitely has a lot more willpower and reserves in its own way. And then same with Mars in Taurus being opposite Mars in Scorpio, and then Mars in Libra being opposite Mars in Aries. So Mars has a lot of kind of range of movement and range of things that it does well in, and it does not necessarily do well in, or it's more uncomfortable in. And Mars in Gemini isn't necessarily a Mars sign that Mars is super uncomfortable in. Mars in air in general I've found has a little bit more of a struggle, because Mars wants to get things done. It wants to hit the ground running, right? It does really well in specifically in fire and earth. It does do well in water because of that rulership of Scorpio. But overall, Mars in air is the only element that doesn't have really something really to grasp on in the same way that Mars in fire does, inherent into that element, and then Mars in earth inherent to Capricorn, and then also Mars in Scorpio inherent to the watery side of that. So Mars has a lot of lessons that it's going to teach the native relative to Gemini things. So when you have Mars in the sign of Gemini, what it's going to teach the native is specifically how to utilize their will, and specifically their will in regards to the information they're getting. So they tend to get quite a lot of information, and they're able to kind of multitask really, really well. So they have this malleability, because Mars in Gemini, it is an air sign. So because it's air, it's going to have this mental component in how it gets things done. So air is all about information, talking. Gemini in specific is about talking and gathering information. It rules the time in our lives that we're going out and we're exploring, and we're kind of picking up all the little pieces and figuring out what our life is meant to be, and kind of putting that perspective together. That's really the Gemini experience, is really going and exploring all of the different avenues of information, all the different concepts, all the different opinions, and like putting them together and saying, this is who I am. So when Mars is in this sign, it's going to be one of those things that Mars is going to really, really get a lot of activity, where it's gonna go here, it's go there, it's gonna go everywhere. It's gonna really explore a lot of information. It's gonna use that information to determine what it wants to do and how it wants to do it, how it wants to execute. So these are gonna be, and this is also kind of true for Mars in Virgo because of the mercurial quality. It's a little bit different because Mars in Gemini is going to like look for a lot of information and go down rabbit holes of information and just really try and understand so much about their landscape and what they're walking into, not necessarily in a more kind of like preparedness way, like not really in a preparation way. It can be, but it's more in the curiosity and the inquisitive way. Like, okay, this is new. What can I learn from this? Where can I go from this? What can I do? And so Mars here has a very fun quality to it. There's a few Mars Geminis I know that have a very active mind, and they really pride themselves on keeping their mind really, really, really active, energized, going, and really they find a lot of livelihood in their conversations. So Mars Gemini really wants to understand the world and utilize the information in their world to really better adapt to their environment. Like this is one of both Mars and Gemini, Mars and Virgo, because they're both mercurial Mars, have a really good gift of being so adaptable to their environment, and they're really quick on their feet. These are the people that are going to have a very quick mind, because Mars wants them to be able to take the information, and especially if Mercury is really well placed, and if Mars is really well aspected as well, there's going to be this kind of this quality of just kind of like research and really active and really malleable way of approaching things. And you'll see that with a lot of the Mars in mutable signs. So Mars in Gemini, Mars in Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. You're going to see that they're all going to kind of have this very adaptable, very much taking in information in their own mutable way, and then being able to pivot and understand how they want to go. Now, with that, Mars and Gemini can definitely have a little bit of an overwhelm of information. This can be the people that are beyond stressed out mentally, because Gemini rules that mental capacity, and Mars there can definitely create quite a lot of mental friction and instability, and a lot of overactive information, overactive mind. So they could be prone to more headaches. They could be prone to more just overwhelm, like overstimulated, because Gemini is very stimulating of a sign, and Mars is also very stimulating as well. So they get their stimulation through more information. And so I think it's really important for those that have Mars and Gemini to know how to filter the information and discern what is valuable information and what is not valuable information, and what can be left alone. Because you'll see Mars and Gemini, they'll kind of just talk all over the place. They'll do quite a lot of different things. And they'll make a lot of content. Like, they have a lot to say. They have a lot to say. Their opinion is where they get a lot of motivation. They find a lot through the constant exploration of their own voice and their opinions, and how that's received and perceived and reacted to by others. They can get a lot of interesting reactions. They also can have this is kind of Gemini in general, but and Gemini placements in general, but they can have a little bit of a gossipy kind of vibe to them, where they really like the information. They like to just eat it all up. And that's why it's really important for Gemini placements to have that discernment. And you'll see that when I get to like the Saturn and Gemini portion, where it has a different quality of like really, really discerning what is really important. Mars also wants that, but Mars wants discernment so that it can be efficient, and so it can be it can get all the right things done, and it can attack all of its tasks and compartmentalize in its own way. Now, Mars Gemini does have a little bit more of a spread out quality than Mars in Virgo, where it's going to kind of be, this is like the epitome, I would say. Gemini in general is very ADD energy, but Mars in Gemini and then Jupiter in Gemini both kind of have this quality of like overwhelm and kind of all over the place. Their hands are in everything. They're doing all these different things. They have all these different projects. They're learning so many different stuff. They're reading like 5 books at once, right? That's another thing with Gemini, is about reading. So Mars and Gemini, there's a really big importance to understand what you're prioritizing information-wise, and what motivates you, what inspires you, what keeps you going, what is something that you want to continuously pursue information-wise, and not getting distracted by the next shiny thing, right? And that's where, if you look to see what else is going on with Mars and your Saturn and other things going on, what's kind of limiting that and what's able to ground that Mars, because that Mars is going to be a little bit more on the agitated side. Mars and Gemini also can be quite amazing for anyone that does rap or spoken word. I find a lot of people with Mars and Gemini have a lot to say, and they can be quite motivating through their words, because Mars is a very motivational planet when it is used authentically and empowered in an empowered context. So they can be very motivating through their words. They can be great writers, like amazing writers, because they want to put their energy and their willpower into what they write and what they speak. They can also have quite a lot of just genuine power when it comes to sales and writing and just merchant and marketing. Marketing is probably something that Mars and Gemini are just naturally good at, mainly because, and I find this with just Gemini third house placements too, where they just kind of just keep talking, and then it just gets more and more traction, right? And that's kind of the thing about Gemini. With Mars Gemini, it's almost they're gonna keep having multiple conversations about multiple things, and that's what energizes them. That's what gets them going, is more and more opinions. And so they can get caught in that. They can definitely be argumentative in that regard too. But Mars and Gemini, I think, is one of the, and most mutable Mars aren't, they can be argumentative for argumentative's sake, but it's a difference. The difference being is debating, I think, is something that is really big for this placement. Like going and really knowing how to take out an argument and how to understand someone's point of view and then work with it. And I think Mars and Gemini, there's so much curiosity there, and I think a lot of people, when they perceive Mars and Gemini, or they are interacting with one, especially if they're on the bad side of Mars and Gemini, meaning that Mars and Gemini is arguing with them, it's important to see past that and see that the Mars Gemini individual is simply just curious and trying to figure out the other side of things. You won't really see necessarily, unless they have a lot of other fixed placements or a lot of more stubborn things within their natal chart, someone who's really going to stand on their specific thing, especially with Mars and Gemini. They kind of want to hear all sorts of opinions. They can definitely have some rigid thoughts for sure, but it's about that exploration. And I think with Mars and Gemini, it's really important to understand that because their communication is so energizing and fiery, it can be very easy to get offended by them and to also get in the same vein, get motivated by them too. You could find great motivational speakers with Mars and Gemini with the ability to create this fire within people through their words. And so it's really about being able to see through that and understand that the Mars Gemini people, in the same way as Mars third house, are going to have this experience that's true to fighting for their opinions, fighting for their voice. Their voice is a lot of where their power lies, and a lot of where their potentially where a lot of their difficulties can lie too, where they're trying to find the right words, the right ways to say stuff, the right information to kind of work with. And so Mars and Gemini is a really fun one, and it's so funny because I feel like I could talk about Mars and Gemini for so long because you guys have such a powerful and all over the place, very inquisitive, very bright energy where it's very much trying to find all these different things and explore many options. And I think it's very fun to see what's inside of the mind of a Mars and Gemini. And I would love to hear your guys' experience because you guys have such a rich knowledge and a rich experience of information that you've gathered and rich opinions and stuff. You have a lot to say. It also can make you a little bit more jittery. It can make you a little bit more overwhelmed mentally. And I think there's these qualities with Mars Gemini that is almost trying to do too much mentally. And like I said, they're great at arguing. They're almost quick-witted in that way. They want people to keep up, right? I know someone who has Mars Gemini and Mercury in Aries, and there's a lot of fighting that they are just instantly able to do mentally. They're like, okay, let's go. And they are very mentally active. And so it's a mental activity that's different from Mercury related to Jupiter, which is what I have, where Mars related to Mercury is a very just fast kind of let's get it together, let's round the troops together, let's have this conversation, let's be the one that says the thing, right? They're also the one that's gonna speak on something. And also too, I also think it's important that I didn't really speak on this much, but it is important to understand that if you do have the last example where you do have a Mars in Gemini and a Mercury in Aries, that's what's called a mutual reception. And so the reason why that has its own power is there's a different level of kind of comparing between the two and lending to one another with that example. And so if you do have Mars and Gemini and happen to have Mercury in Aries as well, I would recommend looking into that and what that experience is like and how mutual reception works. I do have and will be having a webinar on mutual reception in specific, so you're free to look that up on my website as well. But it is something that the Mars Gemini story is just really about information and so much different context and context clues, and they're very studious, but I think it's really important for the Mars Gemini to know what they want to study, because a lot of the time with Mars Gemini they can go in 12,000 different directions and find so many different things to talk about. But they need to know what they want to focus in on, what information is most valuable to them. Let's say if they're learning about, environmentalism, they want that to be the umbrella term and then kind of have shoot-offs that all connect to that. That's probably the best way I would recommend a Mars Gemini work, as opposed to be I have this passion in environmentalism and this other entirely different thing that's not related to that. They can do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that as a Mars Gemini, but you can do that, and then you can bridge those gaps and bring them together. So it's about knowing what information is relevant to your ideal goal, because you're going to get a lot of it with Mars and Gemini. You're going to want a lot of it. And so when you have Mars and Gemini, definitely look to see where your Mercury placement is at and what Mercury is doing. And I said this in the Moon Gemini portion as well, but if Mercury is retrograde with your Mars and Gemini, there's going to be a different quality to that, as well as just your Mercury's placement by dignity, by sign, things like that are going to have a lot more qualities and a lot more of a other layer to this that is really important for Mars and Gemini and everyone to kind of understand about the layers of astrology and how this kind of information can get a little complicated. But if anyone's going to be able to understand it, it'll be a Mars and Gemini individual, and knowing how to keep things going. And the thing about Mars Gemini too, You guys are the people that are going to watch everything on 2x speed. I said this kind of with Moon Gemini too, but Gemini placements have a lot of information that they really want to really understand. It's very interesting because I have 2 Gemini Sun friends in particular that I can think of right now, and one of them was the first one that told me about 2x speed, and they watch everything in 2x speed, and the other one was the one that really showed me about like playlists and information on like YouTube in specific, and how to like create playlists and how to do all those sorts of things. And this was obviously a long time ago, but it's something that's really interesting because Gemini just has this ability where they're like, okay, information, let's see how I can work with it. What's this information? Let's put it all together, right? So it's a very strong placement with Mars and Gemini. I really appreciate all of you. I really like the Mars Gemini story. I think it's really fun. You guys have a very curious, intellectual, young way of approaching things, which I think is why you guys kind of keep your youth, because your mind is always trying to find more and more and more. So yeah, I think you guys have so much to say, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say and where you want to go with this. What information you took from this, what information you have with your experience with Mars and Gemini, and how your argumentative style has been, how your speaking style has been, your writing style, how you have this mental energy that needs to just get out. I would recommend most Mars Gemini as well as Mars 3rd house to find something to speak about and write about, because that's going to be like your biggest gift right there. So yeah, that's the Mars Gemini portion. I have so much more to say, obviously, because it's Gemini week. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next portion. We talk about specifically what it means to have Mars in the 3rd house. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. And also, of course, if you guys are interested in any sort of astrological reading with me, courses, webinars, any of those things, that's down below as well. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next part. We talk about the Mars in the 3rd house. Okay, so Mars in the 3rd house has a very different energy than Mars in Gemini. It is going to have a little bit more of a there's more nuance to this, because Mars in Gemini is going to be Mars in Gemini, and it's going to place itself in different houses. But Mars in the 3rd house can be in various amounts of houses, meaning that it's going to have this almost like interesting quality to 3rd house themes. It's gonna aggravate, energize, motivate towards 3rd house themes. So the 3rd house rules things like our opinion, our voice, our siblings, our information. So you're going to see a lot of the similarities between Gemini and the 3rd house. But the thing is, the 3rd house is where a lot of these family secrets tend to be, because it's 12th to the 4th. And because of that, it's going to have this very curious quality, this very much wanting to figure out how to work with the shadows of the family and the unconscious of the family. So you can see, especially if it's Mars Pisces in the 3rd house, you can see there's a lot of like unresolved family, either addiction patterns or limiting beliefs that need to be unlearned with Mars in the 3rd house. And there's this desire to really understand how to really utilize their voice in a very powerful way, in an empowered way. And if we see like Mars in domicile in either Aries or Scorpio in the 3rd house, you're gonna see a lot of really willful conversations. So you would see more of like Mars, I'll just kind of play through them. So like Mars Aries in the 3rd would be this kind of like leadership quality, pioneering of a new thought, pioneering of a new opinion, kind of being the brave one to speak up. That's kind of what a lot of this would be. Similarly with Mars and Scorpio, but this is bravery because of experience of being shut out and being shut down mentally, and kind of needing to fight for your opinion. And also with siblings too, there's gonna be some very interesting conversations with siblings. With Mars in this 3rd house, there's gonna be almost like a fighting or quarrel with siblings, or fighting for your voice, or fighting to be heard. You see that a lot with Gemini placements, is this this desire to be heard, or a lack of being heard, or something to that effect, where they don't feel like there's this there's as much of an opinion that they have to share, or when they do share their opinion, it's like really intense, right? So if there was like a Mars in Scorpio in the third, this would be someone who would have a little bit on those extreme ends of communication where there's like an extreme kind of muting being done to their voice, but then they have to speak up on that. If we have Mars in like Capricorn in the third, this would be a very militaristic, a very hardened communicator. This could be an amazing person that is a great manager of like, specifically a manager of like shops, restaurants, any fast moving sort of thing. Anyone that works with their hands is also third house. So we see a lot of Mars in the third house people, in addition to being writers and communicators and podcasters as well, making a lot of content. You'll also see Mars in third house, and this is kind of the same with Mars and Gemini, but not always, where they will do a lot of work with their hands. These are also, like if we see Mars Virgo in the third, Mars Capricorn in the third, Mars in any earth sign really in the third, even Mars Taurus is going to have this kind of like engineering or mechanic type of potentiality where they want to really analyze something and really deeply understand it. Mars Scorpio can also do that as well in a more surgical, medical way. Mars in a water sign over there would kind of always do something more surgical, healing based, emotional based. People with Mars in the third can definitely have a desire to really Mars in the third in water would have a desire to really heal people with their voices and motivate people through their voices. And there might be some various different ways that they're doing that. They could be really great therapists with Mars in that third house in water. And they could write a lot of really insightful things about their own emotional and intuitive and kind of like healing experiences that they've gone through with Mars and water in the third. Mars in air in the third, in lieu of Gemini Mars in the third is a very like, that's like very, very pure. And I don't really speak on like what it means to have Mars and Gemini in the third house because it kind of just doubles up on a lot of things, but it makes the Mars third house, Mars Gemini story really loud, right? Really, really, really loud. Where it's almost like there's so much of those pure significators and pure delineations of Mars and Gemini and Mars in the third house that it's going to have like a lot to say and too much to say and too much to do and too much to talk about and all these different things. So there's a lot there. And then Mars and Libra in the third can definitely have this quality of like, this is a lot more of where we'll see like lawyers, we'll see people that are mitigators and kind of like the in-between liaisons, if you will. You'll see a lot of people with PR with Mars and Libra in the third. I'd see this more with Mars and Libra in the 10th, but Mars and Libra in the third definitely has that quality, but you'll see a lot with Mars in the third too. There's this conversation around how they understand their experience and how they use that experience to drive them towards their goals or drive others towards their goals or motivate themselves through their day-to-day. So if we see like a Mars in, Pisces in the third, they might have a little bit more difficulty in really understanding what they're doing, right? They don't really know, but they're kind of following this inner spiritual guidance when you see with Mars in Pisces there. Mars in Leo or Mars in Sag is gonna have a similar quality to it, but this is gonna be almost like there's like this more of a brightness to Mars and Sag in the third, but there is definitely a teaching quality here. There's more teaching you'll see when we start doing the Sag stuff, which is obviously quite a ways away, but what we're seeing is we're talking about Gemini, and Gemini's the opposite of Sag. The third house is the house where we get all of our knowledge and we kind of acquire our baseline of our opinions and our voice and what we want to stand on. And then from there, once it goes all the way through the rest of the zodiac, it goes to the 9th house, then it's like, how do we expand this knowledge from our own neighborhood, our own living experience, our own story? How do we take our story and find the meaning and make it bigger and make it something that is larger? And you'll see that with anyone that has like Mercury and Sagittarius. I chuckle because that's what I have, and I quite literally take my lived experience and I create a meaningful story out of it in my own career, which is very interesting. But when it comes to the Gemini Sag axis, like let's say we put Mars and Sag in the third, there is this very like faith-based, teaching-based quality, specifically through their I did it kind of, I survived this is the meaning I found through it let me kind of lend that meaning or teach that meaning to someone else. There's a lot of that you'll see with Sagittarius and Gemini when those are kind of overlapped in some sort of way. You will definitely see with Mars and Leo in the third, there's this is someone who's a very much creative writer in specific, or someone who needs to have some sort of themselves put into that story in a very creative, artistic, this is me kind of way. That would be there's a lot there that I think is really, really fun. I would love to hear if you have Mars and Leo in the third. I'm excited to get to Leo. It's only, a couple more seasons away, but Leo Mars is a very interesting placement. Place in the third is going to have this kind of like overly creative, overly themselves kind of way about things. And their communication can definitely be, and this is where you'll see, like I was talking about with the Mars Gemini portion, I believe earlier, this is where you'll see someone who will stand on their opinion and won't falter and won't move. They'll be they can tend to be quite argumentative, especially if that Mars is difficultly aspected. There can be this kind of it's all me, no one else has anything to say type of thing. But there is a lot of Mars and Leo, which I'll talk about with the Leo portion for sure, is about identity and identity formation. So having that in the third house is a lot of identity formation through a lot of information. But there is a lot of, you can also see Mars and Leo in the third being like amazing grade school teachers, because Leo and Gemini both have indications related to young children and kind of being there for young children and teaching young children, which I think is really, really powerful. So there's those things. Which one was I missing? Mars Aquarius in the third. This is a very unique one. These are the blog writers. These are the community advocates. These are the grant writers. These are the ones that really, grant writers, pretty Mars Gemini or Mars Aquarius in the third. Like there's a lot of really kind of like different ways of approaching information and knowledge, and these are the ones that will do great with social media marketing and understanding branding and messaging. These could be really, really good people with Mars and Aquarius in the third. A lot of advocacy conversations and trying to find their voice and how it can assist others and bring their voice to other people's causes in a lot of ways. Mars Virgo in the third, I kind of already went over, but that would be like a really, really, really methodical. Like that's whenever you see Gemini and Virgo, or third house and Virgo, or sixth house and Gemini, and those sorts of things overlapping, a lot of mercurial stuff, you'll see someone who is very, very librarian-esque and very information-based and very much like methodical. You'll see surgeons, you'll see accountants, you'll see people that just love to organize and understand information and value it and put it all together and figure it all out. So you'll see that a lot with Mars in Virgo in the third. There is also a need with Virgo placements to kind of perfect the way that they are presenting whatever it is that house is related to. And so the third house is their opinion, their voice, their morals, their certifications too. And you'll see too with Mars in Capricorn or even Mars in Taurus in the third house, you see these as people that will go and get a lot of certifications to add to their financial goals and add to their experiences. Same with Mars Virgo, but it's a little bit different with Mars Virgo in the third, because if Mars Virgo doesn't have a goal, they're going to kind of spin out a little bit. But overall, Mars and Earth in a third house is going to have like a very a need to find information that is really helping them sustain themselves more and build that foundation and build that rootedness that they want and that career success and all of those sorts of things. I think I've gone through pretty much all of them. Mars Cancer in the third, that would just be like a whole, that would be someone that could be really good with specifically family ordeals and family conversations. Obviously, I'll go through all of these more in depth, specifically Mars sign when I go into the Mars of that specific week, right? I'm just kind of going through them just because I feel like the Mars third house people want this. Don't know why. I just feel like you guys do. I feel like I'm not missing any Mars. Yeah, Mars Taurus in the third. This can be someone who is, this once again would be also someone that's a little bit more stubborn on their ideals, on their communication and their opinion. They could be more argumentative when it's a fixed Mars in that third house. But they can also be really trying to find a lot of information that is going to make them money, right? These are the money seekers. These could be great like day traders, people that trade a lot of money in a lot of different ways. And so there's that part there. Let's see what else. Mars Virgo, I did that. Mars Capricorn did that. Mars, Libra in the third, yeah, those are like the mitigators, liaisons. I think I've gone through pretty much all of them. Pisces in the third, these are, I also meant to mention that this also rules, the third house, in addition to Gemini, but more so third house, specifically rules like how you, a couple things, how you sell yourself, like how you get certifications, what you certify yourself as, what information you've kind of collected that is able to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm kind of working towards. And it also rules how you drive. So Mars in the third is going to make, these are the people that will be quite aggressive drivers. You'll see this with people that are Scorpio third housers or Aries third housers as well. Whenever Mars is kind of connected to that third house, you'll definitely see something to that degree. And so, yeah, there's a lot there in regards to how they process information and how they respond to it. And they're very quick-witted in that regard. But it's about them finding the right information. So these are people that I would really recommend, especially if you have like Mars Pisces or Mars Sag, because that's more Jupiterian, to find ways to ground that information, to bring it in, to not just be so scattered and be so driven by information, but find ways to bring that knowledge to someone else and explore that information that you're giving to somebody and see how that information is motivating someone and helping someone in their own way. Because Mars in the third is going to have a very active mind and imagination and opinion and experience with their siblings, their neighbors, their vocal ability. They're going to have this kind of like fighting for themselves kind of thing, fighting for their own voice kind of thing, because they've had to, but also they can utilize a lot of their voice, their opinion, their experience, their upbringing to, you know, make a lot of motivation and goals and be like, I don't want to be there anymore, right? You'll see that a lot with like Mars in more of the water signs. You see that a lot more where they're like, I'm done with feeling this way. I'm going to take the information and find the information and work with it and transmute it. So the thing with Mars too in the third, it's about also transmuting your opinion and your voice. You'll see this a lot more when I get to the Saturn in Gemini, is about really being able to take your opinion and kind of change your perspective. There's a lot about changing perspective with third house placements. And so Mars here is about changing your third house, changing your perspective to align with your goals. You'll see that a lot with Mars Gemini as well too, but Mars third house definitely has more of a lesson around that. Saturn third house, Saturn Gemini definitely has it a lot heavier about really changing that perspective. And Mars there is also doing the same thing, but it's not in the exact as rigid and as like difficult as it would be with Saturn. It is more of a kind of like fighting-esque or like fighting for that change of opinion, change of perspective. So it's about changing your perspective, and I hope that as you grow and you learn more about your chart, you'll see what your Mars in the third house placement is doing. Obviously, with your Mars placement, you're going to want to look to see what the ruler of that sign is. So if it's Mars in Cancer, look at the moon. Mars in Leo, look at the sun. Mars in Virgo, look at Mercury. Gemini, look at Mercury as well. Sag or Pisces, look at Jupiter. Capricorn, Aquarius, look at Saturn. So many different things. There's so many, you guys know, I'm sure you guys know at this point to look at that as well, to see how you're kind of additionally learning how to motivate yourself. And you'll kind of figure it out, especially because you're third housers. You're meant to kind of get into all the guts of information and really understand all of that. And so, yeah, I really love doing this. This is such a fun story to talk about and to go through with Mars in the third house and Mars in Gemini. And this series is super fun. I really love it. And Mars is one of those planets that I have quite a lot of affinity for, hence why it's on my arm. And I've always kind of worked really well with Mars. And so the Mars videos are always really fun for me. Obviously, you guys know this is a giant playlist that I'm making. So I've done all of the Aries and Taurus and in turn first and second house videos, and this is my Gemini and third house videos. So feel free to check through that playlist as those things come out, and I will be putting them out consistently. So we will be going through that, and I'm really excited as this develops. And Mars and Gemini has such a unique approach, and same with Mars in the third. And I would really love, honestly, I would love to hear your guys' opinions, and also your opinions on media too in general, because Gemini does rule that media, that social media. So there's definitely a social media presence that Mars Gemini and Mars third housers can get a lot easier, and just Gemini placements in general can kind of get that. because they're just really malleable and really communicative, and their message has a lot more of a connection to the collective a lot more easily than the average person, just because of the fact that it rules that kind of like quick sort of information exchange. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys. This has been a really fun video. If you guys have any questions about this, obviously put your experiences down below in the description box as well. There's going to be this playlist as well as any other videos, any other things that I got going on my website. If you want to get a book with me, if you want to get my courses, webinars, all those things are down there below as well. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm super excited to continue the series, and yeah, I love you guys, I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you guys soon.